Have you ever looked at a fire and felt strangely calm? Like something deep inside you recognized it, trusted it. There's a reason for that. About 74,000 years ago, the people who built fires like that were not billions. They were not millions. They were not even thousands. They were 1,281 human beings, and the entire future of our species rested on them. Here is the impossible part. To survive, they needed food. But finding food required traveling far. Traveling far meant leaving shelter. Leaving shelter in that world meant death. To have children, they needed safety. But safety required numbers they didn't have. They needed resources to build community. But community requires surviving long enough to build it. Every direction out of the crisis seemed to lead back into it. How do you rebuild a species when you barely have enough people to keep it alive? The answer is fascinating. And it starts with a mountain. Around 74,000 years ago, a supervolcano called Toba erupted in what is now Sumatra, Indonesia. It was the largest volcanic eruption in the last 2 million years. The eruption ejected roughly 2,800 cubic kilometers of ash into the atmosphere. That ash spread across the sky and blocked out the sun for years. Temperatures dropped sharply, possibly by 10 to 15 degrees Celsius in some regions. Plants died, animals that ate plants died, and the humans who hunted those animals nearly died too. Forests across Africa, Asia, and Europe collapsed. Archaeological records go eerily quiet around this period. Almost no human tools, no signs of camps, no traces of life. The world had essentially hit a reset button on humanity. But in a few small pockets, warm, coastal, sheltered corners of the African continent, some held on. The people who survived were not stronger or smarter than the ones who didn't. They were luckier. They happened to live near coastlines. The ocean is a strange kind of insurance policy. Even when inland forests died, the sea kept producing shellfish, fish, and seaweed. Archaeological sites along the South African coast, places like Pinnacle Point and Blombos Cave, show evidence of early humans eating shellfish as far back as 165,000 years ago. After Toba, these coastal communities became the last refugees. They dug for mussels, they cracked open snails, they gathered what the tide left behind. One site at Pinnacle Point even shows early humans using red ochre, a pigment, possibly for ritual, possibly for marking identity. That detail matters, because it means these weren't just surviving people. They were thinking people, communicating people, people who had begun to build something resembling culture. And culture, shared knowledge, shared memory, may have been the actual survival tool. Recovery was not fast. It never is after a bottleneck this severe. For thousands of years, the human population stayed dangerously small. Geneticists can see the evidence of this in our DNA today. Humans are remarkably genetically similar compared to most other large animals. A single group of chimpanzees in West Africa carries more genetic diversity than all 8 billion humans on Earth. That sameness is the fingerprint of Toba, proof that we all descend from an extremely small group. But slowly, in those sheltered coastal camps, families grew. Groups learned to communicate across distances, sharing knowledge about where food could be found. Stone tool technology got more refined. Blades became smaller, sharper, more precise. And then, roughly 60,000 to 70,000 years ago, something remarkable happened. A small group of those coastal survivors, perhaps just a few hundred people, crossed out of Africa. They walked through the Middle East. They reached Central Asia. They pushed east. Within tens of thousands of years, their descendants had reached Australia, Europe, Siberia, and eventually the Americas. Every human being alive today traces their lineage back through that coastal bottleneck. You are, genetically speaking, the descendant of a shellfish-eating community on the shores of Africa. There is something quietly destabilizing about this idea. Every act of culture you've ever experienced, every language, religion, recipe, song, and invention traces back to those few hundred people. The fire they built to stay warm became the fire that cooked the food that nourished the children who eventually built cities. Their survival wasn't heroic in the way we usually imagine heroism. It was slow. It was coastal. It was made of shellfish and small fires and shared ochre. And yet, without them trusting each other, feeding each other, staying close enough to keep their numbers up, the story simply ends. There is no written history. There is no you. We talk about legacy like it's something grand people leave behind deliberately. But the deepest legacy in human history belongs to people who had no idea they were saving the future. They were just trying to make it to tomorrow.